The day I discovered my college fund had been emptied to pay for my stepbrother Ryan's legal troubles was the same day I closed my first seven-figure business deal. At 22, while my parents were secretly transferring my future into Ryan's hands, I was finalizing a contract that would transform a side project into an empire. Sitting in that sleek downtown office, watching investors sign papers that valued my company at $5.2 million, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. For years, my parents had told me how responsible and capable I was. They never realized they were describing the very qualities that would make me successful without them. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. It was a crisp October morning when everything changed. The Massachusetts air had that particular fall sharpness that always reminded me of new beginnings. How fitting that this would be the day when my life would split definitively into before and after. I'd returned home from my senior year mid-semester break at Lockwood University, eager to discuss my graduation plans with my parents. The prestigious economics program had been my dream since freshman year of high school, and now I was only months away from completing it with honors. I pulled into the driveway of our colonial-style home in Westbridge, Massachusetts, the place I'd grown up but increasingly felt disconnected from since my mother remarried when I was 15. The distance wasn't just emotional. I'd deliberately chosen a college 4 hours away, returning only for holidays and the occasional weekend. Each return felt like stepping into a photograph that was becoming increasingly unfamiliar, with my stepfather Richard and his son Ryan gradually taking up more space in the frame. The house was quiet when I entered, which was unusual for a Saturday morning. Typically, my mother would be in the kitchen preparing an elaborate breakfast, while Richard would be watching sports highlights in the living room. Ryan, when he was home and not in trouble, would be sleeping until well past noon. The silence felt heavy, portentous. I found them in the dining room, my mother and Richard, sitting at the table with papers spread between them. Their heads were bent together, voices low and urgent. They looked up when I entered, their conversation halting abruptly. My mother's face, normally composed to perfection, showed clear signs of stress, the slight tightening around her eyes, the way her hand immediately went to adjust her already perfect hair. "Alex, we didn't hear you come in," she said, her voice straining for normalcy. "We thought you weren't arriving until this afternoon." "I caught an earlier train," I replied, setting my backpack down. "Is everything okay?" Richard cleared his throat, shuffling the papers together in a hasty attempt to organize them. "Just some family business we're sorting through." I'd developed a finely tuned radar for family business that actually meant Ryan business. My stepbrother had a talent for creating situations that required parental intervention, financial assistance, or both. At 20, he was already on his second academic probation at the local community college and had a growing collection of minor legal incidents, nothing serious enough for jail time, but enough to require lawyer fees and court appearances. "Ryan in trouble again?" I asked directly. My mother and Richard exchanged looks, that married couple telepathy that always made me feel like an outsider. "Sit down, Alex," my mother said, patting the chair beside her. "There's something we need to discuss." I took the seat, noticing now that some of the papers on the table were bank statements. One had my name at the top, the college fund account my grandparents had established the day I was born. An account that, according to my last update, contained enough to cover my final semester at Lockwood and the first year of the MBA program I'd been accepted to at Harrison Business School. "What's going on?" I asked, though a sinking feeling in my stomach told me I already knew. Richard took the lead, his corporate manager voice activating, the tone he used when delivering difficult news to subordinates. "Ryan has found himself in a complicated situation. He's been arrested for possession with intent to distribute." The words hung in the air between us. This wasn't another minor offense. This was serious, potentially life-altering. "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. But what does that have to do with my college fund statements? My mother reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. Sweetie, the bail amount is substantial, and the lawyer we need, the one who specializes in these cases, requires a significant retainer. I pulled my hand away slowly, the pieces clicking into place with nauseating clarity. You took money from my college fund for Ryan's bail and lawyer? We had to make a difficult decision very quickly, Richard said, his tone shifting from manager to defensive. Ryan is facing potential felony charges. This could affect the rest of his life. And my education doesn't affect the rest of mine? The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I couldn't soften them. It's not like that, Alex, my mother interjected. We know how important your education is, but you've always been so capable, so resourceful. You're already excelling, while Ryan is struggling just to stay afloat. There it was, the familiar refrain. Alex is capable. Alex will figure it out. Alex doesn't need as much help because Alex always succeeds. The same narrative that had defined my relationship with them since my mother remarried had now been weaponized to justify taking my future to bail out Ryan's present. How much? I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. Richard shifted uncomfortably. We needed to secure a $50,000 bail bond, which required a $5,000 payment up front. The attorney's retainer is $15,000. That's $20,000, I noted. My fund had almost $40,000 in it. Another exchange of glances between them. The situation is complicated, Richard continued. There may be additional legal fees depending on how the case progresses. And Ryan will need support for rehabilitation afterward. We thought it best to move the entire amount to have it available as needed. The entire amount. Every dollar my grandparents had saved, that I had contributed to from summer jobs and freelance work. Gone. Transferred to fix another of Ryan's messes. I stood up, needing physical distance from the table, from them, from this betrayal dressed up as family necessity. Did it occur to either of you to ask me? This is my money, money specifically, designated for my education. There wasn't time, my mother said, her voice small. The arraignment was yesterday, and we had to move quickly to get him released. And you couldn't call me? Send a text? Anything? Richard straightened in his chair, his patience visibly thinning. Alex, I understand you're upset, but this is what families do. We support each other in times of crisis. When one of us is drowning, we throw them a lifeline. Even if it means throwing someone else overboard, I countered. That's not fair, my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. We're not abandoning you. We know you'll find a way to make this work. You're graduating with honors. You can get student loans, scholarships. Like the scholarships I turned down because I had a college fund? I interrupted. The ones that have already been awarded to other students? Those scholarships? The room fell silent. They had no answer for that. I took a deep breath, fighting to regain composure. Where is Ryan now? Home. In his room, Richard said. He's not allowed to leave the house except for court appearances and meetings with his lawyer. I nodded slowly. I'm going to talk to him. Alex, my mother started, concerned in her voice. He's very fragile right now. This isn't the time for confrontation. I'm not going to confront him, I said, already moving toward the stairs. I just want to understand what happened. That was partially true. I did want to understand. But more than that, I needed to see him, to look into the face of the person my parents had deemed more worthy of investment than me. Ryan's room was at the end of the hall, the door closed as usual. I knocked once, then entered without waiting, for a response. The room was dark, blinds drawn against the morning light. Ryan was on his bed, phone in hand, looking up with surprise when I entered. Alex? When did you get home? He asked, sitting up. In the dim light, he looked younger than his 20 years. The same tousled brown hair he'd had since he was 12, the same slightly lost expression. But there was something new in his eyes now, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "This morning," I said, closing the door behind me, "I heard about your situation." Ryan dropped his gaze, fingers fidgeting with the edge of his phone case. "Yeah, it's pretty messed up." "What happened?" I leaned against his desk, maintaining a deliberate distance. He shrugged, a gesture so familiar it almost made me forget the gravity of his situation. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong friends. I was holding for someone and the cops showed up. It wasn't even mine, Alex. The denial was automatic, expected. Ryan had never owned his mistakes, not fully. There was always an excuse, always someone else to blame. "Do you know what they did?" I asked quietly. He looked up, confusion crossing his features. "Who? The cops?" "Mom and Richard. Do you know where they got the money for your bail and lawyer?" His expression shifted, guilt flashing briefly before he looked away. "They said they'd handle it. I didn't ask for details." "They emptied my college fund, Ryan. Every cent of it." His head snapped up, genuine shock registering on his face. "What? No way. They wouldn't do that." "They already did it. The transfer went through yesterday." Ryan was silent for a moment, processing. Then, "I didn't ask them to do that, Alex. You have to believe me." And strangely, I did believe him. Ryan had many faults, but he'd never deliberately tried to hurt me. His selfishness was passive, born of privilege and parental indulgence rather than malice. "I know you didn't," I said. "But it happened all the same." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, facing me fully now. "I'll tell them to put it back. They can figure out another way to pay for this." I almost laughed at his naivete. "It doesn't work like that. The money's gone, already committed to your lawyer and whatever else they think you'll need." Then, "I'll pay you back," he insisted. "Once this is all sorted out, I'll get a job, work it off." This time I did laugh, a short, hollow sound. "Ryan, you're facing felony charges. If you're convicted, finding employment won't be easy. And even if you do, at minimum wage, how long would it take you to save $40,000? The reality of his situation seemed to hit him then, his shoulders slumping under the weight of consequences he'd never before had to consider. "I really screwed up this time, didn't I?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. There was no point stating the obvious. "What are you going to do?" he asked after a moment. It was a good question, one I hadn't had time to fully consider. The practical implications were still sinking in. My final semester tuition payment was due in 3 weeks. The deposit for my MBA program a month after that. Years of careful planning, suddenly rendered meaningless. "I'll figure something out," I said, echoing the refrain my parents had always applied to me. "I always do." I left Ryan's room without another word, bypassing the dining room where my parents were likely still sitting with their justifications and rationalizations. I needed air, space, distance from the suffocating weight of family obligation that seemed to fall exclusively on my shoulders. Outside, I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel though I had no destination in mind. My phone buzzed in. My pocket. A text from Marcus, my business partner. "They signed. Call me ASAP." The message catapulted me from one reality to another. While my family drama had been unfolding, the business deal we'd been working on for months had been finalized. Innotech, a venture capital firm, had agreed to invest $1.2 million in CodeBridge, the software company Marcus and I had built from our dorm room over the past 3 years. What had started as a side project, a platform to help small businesses integrate their existing software systems without expensive custom solutions, had gradually evolved into something with real market potential. We'd bootstrapped our way through early development, working nights and weekends while maintaining our course loads. Then came our first paying clients, small victories that validated our concept. And now, investment capital that would transform our project into a legitimate business. My parents knew nothing about CodeBridge. They knew I was studying economics and had vague entrepreneurial interests, but I'd kept the details private, partly because I wanted to establish something independently, without Richard's corporate wisdom or my mother's anxious input, but also because I'd learned early in their marriage that achievements that couldn't be equally attributed to or shared with Ryan were often downplayed, sometimes resented. I called Marcus, pushing thoughts of my emptied college fund aside for the moment. "We did it," he exclaimed when he answered. "They transferred the first installment this morning. We're officially in business, Alex." "That's incredible," I said, genuine excitement breaking through my emotional turmoil. "How did the final meeting go?" "Smooth as silk." Thompson was impressed with the client acquisition numbers from the beta test, said we're addressing a pain point that's been neglected in the market. His voice was rapid with enthusiasm. "They're arranging office space for us in the Harrington building downtown. Real, legitimate offices, Alex, not just the corner of your bedroom." The mention of my bedroom brought reality crashing back. I glanced at the house, thinking of the conversation still waiting for me inside. "Hey, you okay?" Marcus asked, picking up on my subdued response. "This is what we've been working toward. I thought you'd be over the moon." "I am," I assured him. "It's just family stuff. I'll tell you about it later. This is our moment. Let's focus on that." "If you say so." Anyway, they want us to meet with their PR team on Monday to discuss the official launch. Can you make it back by then? Monday, 2 days from now. The original plan had been to spend the weekend at home, return to campus Monday evening, but the thought of spending another 48 hours under this roof with these people who had so casually dismissed my future was unbearable. "I'll be there," I promised. "Actually, I think I'll head back today. We have a lot to prepare." "Seriously? I thought you were doing the whole family weekend thing." "Change of plans," I said simply. "Text me the meeting details. I'll see you tonight." After ending the call, I sat for another moment, formulating my next steps. The investment from Innotech changed things. With my portion of the funding, I could potentially cover my final semester at Lockwood. The MBA might have to wait, but I could complete my undergraduate degree without loans. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but it was a path forward, one I'd created entirely on my own, without family support or connections. There was a certain poetic justice to it, solving a problem they created with success they knew nothing about. I returned to the house, finding my parents still at the dining room table, now joined by cups of coffee that had gone cold. They looked up when I entered, their expressions a mixture of concern and defensiveness. "Alex," my mother started, "we should talk more about this. We can look into student loan options together, maybe speak to the financial aid office at your school." "That won't be necessary," I interrupted, my voice calm and measured. "I'll handle my education expenses myself." Richard frowned. "Alex, be reasonable. Without your fund, you'll need significant loans. We can help with the application process, maybe co-sign if needed." The offer of help that wasn't really helpful, just more paperwork, more debt, more strings, was so typically Richard that I almost laughed. "I said I'll handle it," I repeated. "I'm leaving today, heading back to campus. I have meetings early next week that I need to prepare for." "What meetings?" my mother asked, confusion evident. "I thought your classes didn't resume until Tuesday." I considered my response carefully. There was a part of me that wanted to reveal everything, to watch their faces as they learned that the responsible, capable child they had taken for granted had built something valuable right under their noses. But another part, the part that had protected CodeBridge from their influence until now, held back. "Professional development opportunities," I said vaguely. "Nothing you need to worry about." Alex, Richard began, his tone shifting to the one he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. I know you're upset, but this reaction isn't productive. We're still a family. We need to work through this together. Like we worked through the decision to empty my college fund together? I countered. Or is together only applicable when it suits you? The words landed with precision, silencing both of them momentarily. We made the best decision we could in a crisis situation, my mother said finally, her voice small. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but we were trying to protect our family. Part of your family, I corrected. The part you valued more. Richard stood then, his patience visibly at an end. That's enough, Alex. We understand you're disappointed, but this attitude isn't helping anyone. Ryan is facing serious legal consequences. This isn't about favoritism. It's about necessity. I looked at him steadily, recognizing the familiar pattern. My feelings were attitude, my concerns disappointment, my valid objections unhelpful. The minimization of my experience was so routine that they probably didn't even realize they were doing it. I need to pack, I said, turning toward the stairs. I'll be gone within the hour. My mother followed me to my room, hovering anxiously, in the doorway as I methodically placed clothes back into my suitcase. Alex, please, she said. Don't leave like this. We can figure something out together. I continued packing, not looking up. That's exactly what I'm doing, figuring something out. Isn't that what you always expected of me? We never meant to make you feel less important, she persisted. We're proud of you, of your independence and resilience. Those qualities will serve you well in life. Finally, I stopped, turning to face her directly. They already have. More than you know. Something in my tone must have registered, because she looked at me with sudden curiosity. What does that mean? For a moment, I considered telling her everything, about CodeBridge, about the investment, about the future I'd been building parallel to the one they thought they knew. But what would be the point? To prove my worth? To make them regret their decision? Neither seemed like a sufficient reason to share something I'd protected so carefully until now. It means I'll be fine, I said instead. But not because you took away my support and forced me to be resilient. Because I chose to build something for myself long before you made that choice for me. She looked confused, but didn't press further. Perhaps she sensed that some boundary had been crossed that couldn't easily be repaired. When I carried my suitcase downstairs 30 minutes later, Richard was waiting by the front door, arms crossed, face set in what he probably thought was a reasonable expression. This isn't the end of the conversation, Alex, he said as I approached. We'll discuss this further when you've had time to process and think rationally. I set my suitcase down, meeting his gaze directly. You're right about one thing. This isn't the end, but whatever comes next will be on my terms, not yours. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, brow furrowing. It means you made a choice. That affects my future without consulting me. Now I'll make choices about my future without consulting you. My mother appeared from the kitchen, distress evident in every line of her face. Alex, please don't go like this. Stay the weekend as planned. We can talk more, work through this together. I picked up my suitcase again and made it. I'll call when I get back to campus, let you know I arrived safely. It was a small concession, but the relief on her face was immediate. Even now, in the Yatyai midst of conflict, I was the responsible one, the one who would do the right thing, maintain the connection, ease her worry. As I placed my suitcase in the trunk, I noticed Ryan watching from his bedroom window. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Acknowledgement, perhaps, of the imbalance between us, of the different standards to which we were held. I nodded back, closing the trunk. There was no point blaming Ryan for a dynamic he benefited from but didn't create. The responsibility lay with the adults who had established and maintained that uneven distribution of support and expectation. Driving away from the house, I felt something unexpected beneath the anger and hurt, a sense of liberation. For years, I had operated within the confines of their perception, being the responsible, independent child they could depend on to succeed without support. Now, with their decision to empty my college fund, they had inadvertently removed the last obligation I felt to fulfill their expectations. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Office space confirmed. Corner unit with a view. This is really happening. I smiled, the first genuine smile since arriving home. Yes, it was really happening. In more ways than one. While my parents thought they were redirecting my future toward struggle and compromise, they had actually accelerated my path to complete independence. The 7-figure business deal I'd just closed would not only secure my education, but launch me into a professional trajectory they couldn't begin to imagine. What they saw as capability, I had transformed into enterprise. What they took for granted, I had leveraged into opportunity. And what they had taken from me, financial support for my future, I had already replaced with something more valuable, a future entirely of my own making. The irony wasn't lost on me as I merged onto the highway, leaving Westbridge behind. The day my parents emptied my college fund to bail out my stepbrother was the same day I became a millionaire. They just didn't know it yet. The 4-hour drive back to Lockwood University gave me plenty of time to process the morning's events. Each mile put physical distance between me and my parents' betrayal, but the emotional shock remained like a splinter under my skin. I replayed the conversation repeatedly, searching for something I might have missed, some indication that they had considered my future before sacrificing it for Ryan's. There was nothing. In their minds, the equation was simple. Ryan needed help now. I would find a way to manage later. As I crossed the state line into New Hampshire, I called Marcus to update him on my early return. I can be at the apartment by 5, I told him. We should prepare for Monday's meeting tonight. What happened during the family weekend? He asked. Don't tell me you're ditching your mom's famous Sunday brunch. You've been talking about her blueberry pancakes for weeks. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Marcus knew the broad strokes of my family dynamics. The remarriage when I was 15. The stepbrother who consistently underperformed. My mother's divided attention. But I'd never fully articulated how systematically my achievements were. Minimized while Ryan's problems were prioritized. They emptied my college fund, I said finally, the words still surreal even as I spoke to them. The entire thing, for Ryan's bail and lawyer fees. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd lost connection. They did what? Marcus eventually responded, disbelief evident in his tone. The whole fund? Without asking you? Can they even do that legally? Apparently. The account was in my name, but with my mother as custodian until I turned 25. My grandparents set it up that way to ensure I wouldn't blow it on something impulsive. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I don't even have words, Marcus said. What are you going to do about next semester's tuition? And the MBA program? I took a deep breath, merging onto the highway that would take me directly to Lockwood. The Innotech investment changes things. My share covers enough to finish undergrad without loans. The MBA might need to wait. Alex, that money is for scaling CodeBridge. We just signed papers committing to specific business development targets. We can't just redirect it to your tuition. Not all of it, I clarified. Just enough to cover next semester. We'll still have capital for the expansion plan. Besides, what good is a software company if its co-founder doesn't complete their degree? Education is a business investment too. Marcus sighed, and I could picture him running a hand through his perpetually messy hair, his standard gesture when processing complex problems. When you put it that way. But we'll need to adjust the budget. I'll start running numbers tonight. Thanks. And Marcus? let's keep this between us for now. I don't want the Innotech team thinking we have personal financial instability. Course. See you at 5. We'll figure this out. That was Marcus. Pragmatic, solution-oriented, and unquestioningly loyal. We'd met freshman year in Introduction to Programming, paired together on a project neither of our business-focused majors had prepared us for. What started as mutual academic survival evolved into friendship, then partnership. He was the technical brain behind CodeBridge. I was the business strategist. Together, we'd built something neither could have accomplished alone. Arriving at our off-campus apartment, I found Marcus already at work at the dining table we'd converted into a desk, surrounded by multiple laptops displaying spreadsheets, code, and market analysis reports. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "All right, I've run preliminary numbers," he said without preamble. "If we adjust the marketing budget and delay the office renovation, we can allocate enough for your tuition without compromising the core development schedule." I set my bag down, momentarily overwhelmed by his immediate focus on solving my problem. It was a stark contrast to my family's assumption that I'd just figure something out on my own. "Thank you," I said simply. Marcus nodded, eyes already back on the screen. "The Innotech meeting on Monday is with their PR and marketing team. They want to coordinate the official announcement of their investment. Standard publicity stuff, but it's a good opportunity to establish the professional tone we want to set." I moved to the kitchenette, starting a pot of coffee. We'd need it for the long night ahead. We should prepare a condensed version of the 5-year plan. Show them we're thinking beyond the initial capital infusion. For the next several hours, we immersed ourselves in business planning, revising budgets, refining marketing strategies, preparing presentation materials for Mondays. Meeting. It was familiar territory, the kind of work that had filled our evenings and weekends for the past 3 years. But now, with actual investment capital and imminent public launch, everything carried more weight. Around midnight, Marcus stretched and closed his laptop. "I think we're as prepared as we can be. The rest can wait until tomorrow." I nodded, but made no move to stop working. The alternative was sleep, which meant facing thoughts of my parents' betrayal without the buffer of productive distraction. "Alex," Marcus said gently, "you need rest. Today has been a lot, even without the family bombshell." I looked up, suddenly aware of how exhausted I actually was. "You're right. I don't want to think about it right now." "I get that. But avoiding it won't make it go away." "I know," I admitted. "I just can't believe they would do this." Not even the decision itself, but the way they did it, without discussion, without warning. Like my future was just a resource they could reallocate whenever something more important came along. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering. "Have you thought about what you'll say when they inevitably ask how you're paying for tuition without the fund?" The question caught me off guard. In the rush of events, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I guess I assumed I'd tell them about CodeBridge now. There doesn't seem to be much reason to keep it private anymore. "Are you sure that's what you want?" They might see it as an opportunity to undo the damage, or worse, feel justified in their decision because you had a backup plan all along. His observation was uncomfortably perceptive. If my parents learned about CodeBridge and its investment capital, they might indeed frame their decision differently in retrospect, not as a betrayal of my future, but as a reasonable choice given my hidden resources. "You're right," I said slowly. "Maybe it's better to keep it separate for now. Let them believe I'm figuring it out through loans and scholarships." "And when will they eventually find out?" "Because they will, especially after the official launch." I considered this, weighing the satisfaction of revelation against the practical implications. By then, it will be a fait accompli. My education was secured, CodeBridge established. Their opinion won't matter as much. Marcus nodded, but his expression remained concerned. "Just be careful. Family complications have a way of affecting business judgment, even when we think we've compartmentalized. His warning wasn't unfounded. We'd both seen promising student startups implode when personal matters interfered with business decisions. But CodeBridge was different, more structured, more professional, built on a foundation of meticulous planning rather than impulsive inspiration. "I'll keep personal and professional separate," I promised. "Speaking of which, I should probably call my mother, let her know I arrived safely." Marcus took the hint, gathering his things to head to his room. "Don't stay up too late. Tomorrow? We still need to finalize the technical demonstration for Monday." After he left, I stared at my phone, dreading the conversation ahead. Finally, I dialed, hoping my voice would betray none of the anger and hurt still churning inside. My mother answered on the first ring. "Alex, are you okay? Did you arrive safely?" "I'm fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Just got in a little while ago." "We've been so worried. Richard wanted to call earlier, but I thought you might need space." The mention of my stepfather's concern rang hollow. His worry now couldn't erase his dismissiveness earlier. "I'm calling." "As promised," I said. "Just letting you know I arrived safely." There was a pause, the silence heavy with all the things unsaid between us. "Alex, about this morning," she began hesitantly. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But please understand, we had to make a very difficult decision very quickly." "You've made that clear," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And I've told you I'll handle my education expenses myself." "But how?" "We've looked at the numbers, Alex. Even with your scholarships, the remaining tuition is substantial. And the MBA program—" "I said I'll handle it," I interrupted more sharply than intended. Then, softening my tone, "I have options I'm exploring. You don't need to worry about it." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was tentative. "What options exactly? If there's something we can help with, like you helped with my college fund?" The words escaped before I could stop them, laden with the bitterness I'd been trying to contain. "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Isn't it? You made a unilateral decision about my future without consulting me. Now I'm making decisions about my future without consulting you. Seems perfectly fair to me." I could hear her soft intake of breath, the hurt my words had caused. Part of me regretted the harshness, while another part felt vindicated. For once, the consequences of a family decision weren't falling solely on my shoulders. "We never meant to hurt you," she said finally. "We were just trying to help Ryan." "I know," I acknowledged, some of the anger deflating. "That's always been the priority." "That's not true. We've always supported you, been proud of your achievements." "Support isn't just about pride, Mom. It's about actually being there, making sacrifices, prioritizing needs. When have you ever put my needs above Ryan's?" The question hung between us, unanswerable, because we both knew the truth. Since Richard and Ryan had entered our lives, the family dynamic had consistently bent toward Ryan's struggles rather than my successes. "I'm tired," I said after a moment. "It's been a long day. I should go." "Alex, please," my mother began, but I cut her off gently. "Good night, Mom. I'll call again soon." I ended the call before she could respond, the weight of unresolved tension settling heavily on my shoulders. Part of me wanted to clear the air completely, to lay out every instance where I'd felt sidelined, every time my achievements had been minimized while Ryan's smallest efforts were celebrated. But what would be the point? They'd made their choice. Now, I am making mine. The next morning, Marcus and I dove back into preparations for Monday's meeting. We refined our presentation, rehearsed answers to anticipated questions, and finalized the technical demonstration that would showcase CodeBridge's integration capabilities. By Sunday evening, we felt prepared for whatever the InnoTech team might throw at us. "We should celebrate," Marcus suggested as we finished our final run-through. The investment is secured. The hard part is over. I raised an eyebrow. The hard part is just beginning. Now we actually have to deliver on everything we promised. Always the optimist, he teased. Seriously, though, this is a milestone worth acknowledging. Dinner at Martinelli's? My treat. Martinelli's was the upscale Italian restaurant downtown, where we'd always joked we'd celebrate when we made it big. The place where successful alumni took their parents after graduation, where engagement proposals happened over tiramisu, where a meal cost more than our weekly grocery budget. Martinelli's? I echoed, surprised. Are you sure? That's pretty extravagant. Marcus grinned. We just closed a 7-figure investment deal. If that doesn't qualify as an occasion for extravagance, what does? He had a point. And after the emotional roller coaster of the past 2 days, the idea of celebrating our success held undeniable appeal. All right, I agreed. Martinelli's it is. The restaurant was everything we'd imagined. Elegant without being pretentious, with soft lighting, impeccable service, and food that justified the prices. We were seated at a corner table with a view of the town square, the fall foliage illuminated by tasteful street lamps. As we waited for our entrees, Marcus raised his glass. To Codebridge, from a dorm room project to an actual company with actual capital. I clinked my glass against his. To Codebridge, and to prove that business majors can actually write functional code. We both laughed, the tension of the past days finally easing. This was what we'd worked toward for 3 years. The validation of our concept, the resources to scale, the transition from student entrepreneurs to legitimate business owners. You know, Marcus said thoughtfully, swirling his wine. 3 years ago, when we were struggling through that first algorithm, I never imagined we'd end up here. It seemed so impossible then. Building something from nothing usually does, I replied. That's why most people don't try. Or they give up when it gets difficult, he added. Remember the Watson Group? They had that promising AI scheduler, but disbanded after the first round of user testing showed flaws. I nodded, remembering the rival student startup that had garnered early attention before collapsing under its founders' competing visions and inability to adapt to feedback. We succeeded because we were methodical, I said. We didn't rush to market with a half-baked concept. We tested, refined, pivoted when necessary. And because we're too stubborn to quit, Marcus added with a grin. Our food arrived, momentarily halting the conversation. As we ate, I found myself reflecting on the contrast between this moment of professional achievement and the personal setback I'd experienced just 2 days ago. The dichotomy was jarring. On one hand, the culmination of years of dedicated work. On the other, the painful reminder that family support could be withdrawn without warning. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, noticing my distant expression. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Just the irony of it all. 2 days ago, I thought I had my post-graduation future mapped out. Finish at Lockwood, start the MBA program, gradually transition to full-time at Codebridge while completing my degree. Now everything's accelerated. The education plan is in flux, but the business is moving faster than we anticipated. Life rarely follows the script we write for it, Marcus observed. That's why adaptability matters more than planning, and if there's one thing you excel at, it's adapting to changing circumstances. His observation struck a chord. Perhaps that was what my parents had always seen in me, not just capability, but adaptability. The problem was, they'd come to depend on that quality so completely that they no longer recognized when they were testing its limits. I've been thinking, I said, changing the subject slightly. With the InnoTech announcement, we should be prepared for increased scrutiny, not just of the business, but of us personally. Investors, potential clients, competitors, they'll all be looking for information. Marcus nodded. Standard due diligence. Our LinkedIn profiles and academic records are solid. What are you concerned about? Family complications? I admitted. If my parents' decision about the college fund becomes known, or if Ryan's legal troubles somehow connect back to us, it could raise questions about stability, judgment. That seems unlikely, Marcus said. Unless your stepbrother is involved in something that would trigger background checks beyond the standard ones we've already cleared for the investment. I shook my head. Nothing like that. From what I understand, it's possession with intent to distribute. Serious but not organized crime territory. I'm probably overthinking it. Better to overthink than be blindsided, he said pragmatically. We should inform legal counsel about the potential for family complications, just as a precaution. They don't need specifics, just awareness that there might be peripheral issues requiring management. The suggestion was sensible, the kind of proactive risk mitigation that had served us well in building CodeBridge. Yet something in me resisted the idea of officially connecting my family's dysfunction to our business operations. Let me think. About it, I said finally. After the Innotech meeting tomorrow, we'll have a better sense of their public relations strategy. That might inform how we handle potential complications. Marcus agreed, and we turned the conversation to lighter topics. For the remainder of dinner. By the time we returned to the apartment, the stress of the weekend had largely dissipated, replaced by focused anticipation for the next day's meeting. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Any chance we could talk tomorrow? Just the two of us? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted nothing to do with family matters until I'd secured my educational future and established CodeBridge's post-investment operations. Another part recognized that Ryan, despite benefiting from my parents' decision, hadn't made it himself. After several minutes of deliberation, I replied, busy with meetings all day tomorrow, maybe later in the week. His response came quickly. Please, I need to talk to someone who won't just tell me what I want to hear. The request was unexpected. Ryan had plenty of friends, a social circle that had always seemed to materialize around him despite, or perhaps because of, his perpetual struggles. That he would reach out to me, the step-sibling he had little in common with and whose future had just been sacrificed for his benefit, was surprising. Wednesday, I texted back. I can call around 8 p.m. Thanks. Good luck with your meetings. I set the phone aside, wondering what Ryan could possibly want to discuss that couldn't be shared with our parents. Whatever it would have to wait. Tomorrow was about CodeBridge, about officially transitioning from student project to legitimate business, from potential to reality. As I drifted toward sleep, one thought kept surfacing. The day my parents had revealed their betrayal was the same day an opportunity had opened before me. Their decision had closed one door, while another was simultaneously opening. One I had built myself, piece by piece, line of code by line of code, client by client. There was a certain poetic justice in that timing. While they were deciding I would need to figure something out on my own I already had, not because of their lack of support, but despite it. The challenge now was to keep those worlds separate enough to protect CodeBridge's momentum while I navigated the aftershocks of family betrayal. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, the campus quiet as most students enjoyed the mid-semester break. Marcus and I dressed in our best business attire, not quite corporate suits, but professional enough to convey seriousness without looking like we were trying too hard. The balance was important. We wanted to appear legitimate without losing the innovative edge that had attracted investment in the first place. Ready for this? Marcus asked as we gathered our presentation materials. I nodded, pushing thoughts of family drama firmly aside. Ready as we'll ever be. As we headed toward the waiting Uber that would take us to Innotech's regional office, I silently affirmed the decision I'd made during the night. CodeBridge would succeed or fail on its own merits, uncomplicated by family issues. The two realms would remain separate, not just for now, but permanently. My parents had made their choice based on their priorities. I had built CodeBridge based on mine. And moving forward, those distinct paths would continue on separate trajectories, at least until the day, if it ever came, when those worlds would inevitably collide. The Innotech meeting exceeded our expectations. Their PR team was impressive, seasoned professionals who understood both the technical value of CodeBridge and how to position it in the crowded software integration market. By the end of the 2-hour session, we had a comprehensive launch strategy, media contacts primed for exclusive interviews, and a schedule of industry events where CodeBridge would make strategic appearances. "You've built something remarkable," said Vanessa Kirsch, Innotech's head of communications as we wrapped up. "Most integration platforms focus on enterprise-level clients with 6-figure budgets. Your solution for small to mid-sized businesses fills a significant gap in the market." "That was always our vision," I explained. "Democratizing integration capabilities that have traditionally been accessible only to companies with substantial IT resources." "Well, it resonates with the market research," she replied, sliding a folder across the table. "These are preliminary results from the focus groups we conducted last week. The response is overwhelmingly positive, especially from businesses in the $105 million annual revenue range." Marcus and I exchanged glances, momentarily stunned by the validation. We'd believed in CodeBridge's potential from the beginning, but seeing objective confirmation from industry professionals was different from our own optimism. "We'll need to accelerate the server expansion," Marcus noted, already thinking ahead to technical implications. "This level of interest will translate to higher initial user volume than we projected." Thomas Bennett, Innotech's investment liaison, nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of forward thinking we invested in. Your technical architecture report showed scalability planning, but it's good to hear you're already adjusting to these projections." As the meeting concluded, Vanessa pulled me aside while Marcus discussed technical specifics with Innotech's development advisor. "Alex, I hope you don't mind, but we've scheduled you for a feature in Business Innovators magazine next month," she said, her tone suggesting this was a significant opportunity. "They're doing a special issue on emerging technologies, and CodeBridge perfectly exemplifies the kind of innovation they want to highlight." "That's surprising," I managed, caught off guard by the high-profile exposure. "We were thinking of a more gradual media rollout." Vanessa shook her head. "In today's market, gradual is a luxury you can't afford. The moment you launch, competitors will be analyzing your model, preparing responses. We need to establish CodeBridge as the definitive solution in this space immediately, which means strategic visibility." She was right, of course. Our business plan had always acknowledged the narrow window of opportunity before larger companies would develop comparable solutions. But the accelerated timeline made one thing clear: my family would learn about CodeBridge sooner than I'd anticipated. A feature in Business Innovators wasn't something that would go unnoticed, especially by Richard, who religiously read every business publication he could get his hands on. "When is the interview scheduled?" I asked, mentally calculating timeline implications. "Next Monday. They'll want background on both you and Marcus, the standard founder's journey narrative, your education, early ventures, how CodeBridge originated. Nothing too invasive, but personal enough to humanize the technology." I nodded, already formulating how to present my background without revealing the recent family complication. "I'll be prepared." As we left the Innotech offices, Marcus couldn't contain his excitement. "Did you see those market projections? We're looking at potential adoption rates double what we estimated. The revenue implications are significant. And the exposure timeline is accelerated," I added. "Business Innovators want a feature next month." Marcus whistled low. "That's major. Your stepdad reads that magazine, doesn't he?" "Religiously. Which means we need to prepare for family complications sooner than expected." He gave me a sidelong glance as we walked toward the car. "Are you going to tell them before the article or let them discover it there?" It was a legitimate question, one I'd been turning over since Vanessa mentioned the interview. The idea of my parents learning about CodeBridge from a magazine held a certain appeal, a form of passive vindication. But it also seemed unnecessarily dramatic, potentially creating complications that could distract from business objectives. I'll tell them, I decided. Not everything, but enough so they're not blindsided. After my call with Ryan on Wednesday. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. We secured our new office space in the Harrington building, met with the potential hires for the expanded development team, and finalized the server infrastructure upgrades necessary for the anticipated user volume. Through it all, I maintained deliberate focus on business matters, pushing thoughts of family drama to the periphery. Until Wednesday evening arrived, and with it, the promised call with Ryan. I excused myself from a planning session with Marcus, retreating to my bedroom for privacy. At exactly 8 p.m., I dialed Ryan's number, unsure what to expect. Alex? His voice sounded different over the phone. Younger, less confident than his usual demeanor. I'm here. What did you want to talk about? There was a pause, the sound of a doctor closing on his end. I need advice. Real advice, not the enabling bullshit everyone else is giving me. The directness was surprising. In our complex family dynamic, Ryan and I had developed a cordial but distant relationship, respectful, enough but rarely involving genuine confidence. Okay, I said cautiously. I'm listening. This charge is serious. My lawyer says the best-case scenario is probation and mandatory treatment. The worst case is actual jail time. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. I knew dealing was stupid, but I didn't think it through. It was perhaps the most honest self-assessment I'd ever heard from him. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Surely your lawyer has explained the situation better than I could. Another pause. Because you're the only person who won't sugarcoat things or make excuses for me. Mom and Richard are in full damage control mode, talking about youthful mistakes and learning experiences, like I accidentally shoplifted candy instead of getting caught with enough product to constitute distribution. The characterization was accurate. My mother and Richard had perfected the art of reframing Ryan's poor choices as unfortunate circumstances or valuable life lessons. And your friends? I prompted. He laughed, a hollow sound. Most have disappeared since the arrest. The few who haven't are either involved in similar activities themselves or so disconnected from reality they think this will all just go away. Nobody's telling me the truth except my lawyer, and he's being paid to find the best outcome, not give life advice. I sat on the edge of my bed, processing this unexpected vulnerability from my usually bravado-filled stepbrother. So what do you want from me? I'm not a lawyer or a counselor. I want to know how to fix this, he said simply. Not just the legal situation, but everything. The pattern. The whole mess I've made. The request was so far outside our established dynamic that I momentarily struggled to respond. Ryan had never acknowledged his pattern of poor choices before, let alone asked for help addressing it. That's a big question, I finally said. And probably beyond a single phone call. I know, but I have to start somewhere. His voice had a determination I'd rarely heard from him. And watching how everyone's handled this situation, I realized something. You're the only person in my life who consistently experiences consequences. Everyone else, me included, gets bailed out, excused, rescued, but you have to figure things out on your own. The observation stung with its accuracy, yet coming from Ryan, it carried no malice, only dawning recognition. I didn't ask for your college fund, he continued when I didn't immediately respond. When I found out what they'd done, I was shocked. And then I realized I wasn't actually surprised at all. It's what they've always done, prioritized my crises over your stability. It's not your fault, I said automatically, the responsible sibling response ingrained over years. Maybe not directly, he acknowledged, but I've benefited from it consistently. And never questioned it until now, when the stakes are high enough that even I can see how messed up it is. His self-awareness was startling, completely at odds with the Ryan I thought I knew. Had his legal troubles catalyzed this reflection, or had it been building beneath the surface all along? "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I questioned, still uncertain of his objective. "Tell me how to be more like you," he said bluntly. "Independent, self-sufficient, capable of dealing with problems without everyone rushing in to fix them. Because this legal situation has made one thing clear: I can't continue as I have been." The request was both flattering and incredibly complex. The qualities he was describing hadn't developed overnight, but through years of necessity, often born from the very family dynamic that had protected him from consequences. "It's not something I can just explain," I said carefully. "It's a mindset, developed over time. Taking responsibility, anticipating consequences, making plans with multiple contingencies. So teach me," he persisted. "I'm not expecting an overnight transformation, but I need to start somewhere." I considered his request, weighing my complicated feelings about our family situation against his genuine plea for guidance. Whatever resentment I harbored about the college fund, Ryan was still family, and now, unexpectedly, he was asking for help becoming more responsible rather than seeking another bailout. "All right," I conceded. "But this isn't about life advice in this abstract. Start with your current situation. What's your plan if you get probation? Or if you serve time? Have you thought beyond the immediate legal outcome?" "Not really," he admitted. "Everyone's been so focused on the hearing and minimizing consequences that we haven't discussed what happens after." "That's where you need to start," I advised. "Develop a concrete plan for each potential outcome: education options, employment possibilities, living arrangements. Don't wait for Mom and Richard to figure it out for you." He was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him processing this straightforward approach. "That makes sense. I'll start working on it." "Good. And Ryan?" "The fact that you're thinking about this at all is already a step in the right direction." "Thanks, Alex. For talking to me. For not, I don't know, hating me because of what happened with your college fund." His vulnerability was disarming, making it impossible to maintain the emotional distance I'd carefully established. "I don't hate you," I assured him. "I'm angry at the situation and the decision-making, but not at you personally. You didn't create the family dynamic, you just existed within it, like I did." After we ended the call, I sat for several minutes, processing the unexpected conversation. Ryan's request for guidance represented a potential shift in our relationship, from distant step-siblings navigating an uneven family system to something more direct, possibly even supportive. But it also posed complications. If Ryan was genuinely working toward greater responsibility and independence, wouldn't my continued secrecy about CodeBridge undermine that growth? Didn't true responsibility include transparency about my own situation? The questions lingered. As I rejoined Marcus in the living room, where he was finalizing server allocation plans for the launch. "How was the family call?" he asked, glancing up from his laptop. "Surprising," I admitted. Ryan actually wanted advice on becoming more responsible. "Not at all what I expected." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Interesting timing. Legal troubles tend to clarify priorities." "Maybe. But it seemed genuine. He's actually reflecting on the family pattern and his role in it." "So does this change your approach? Are you going to tell them about CodeBridge sooner?" I hesitated, still processing the implications. "I'm not sure. The Business Innovators interview is Monday. That gives me less than a week to figure out how much to reveal and when." "For what it's worth," Marcus offered, "I think a controlled disclosure on your terms is better than having them discover it through media coverage, especially if your stepbrother is already questioning the family dynamic." He had a point. The prospect of a public article meant disclosure was inevitable. managing the timing and context might minimize potential complications. I'll call them this weekend, I decided. Just a basic overview, enough to prepare them for the article without detailing everything. With that decision made, we returned to business preparations, finalizing plans for the office setup and initial hiring wave. The next few days passed in a blur of activity: meetings with IT infrastructure providers, interviews with potential development team members, legal consultations about client contracts. By Friday, we had secured commitments from 3 senior developers, signed the lease for our permanent office space, and established the server architecture necessary for our anticipated growth. Each accomplishment further cemented the reality of CodeBridge's transition from student project to legitimate business. That evening, as Marcus and I reviewed the week's progress over takeout in our apartment, my phone rang with an unexpected call from my mother. Hesitating briefly, I answered. "Alex? Is this a good time to talk?" Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual carefully maintained composure. "I'm in the middle of something," I replied cautiously. "Is everything okay?" "Not really. Ryan's hearing date has been set for next Thursday. His lawyer says—" She paused, her breath catching audibly. "The prosecutor is pushing for jail time, Alex. Actual incarceration, not just probation." The news was concerning, though not entirely surprising given the seriousness of the charges. "What does his lawyer recommend?" "He's negotiating for probation, with mandatory treatment, but he says we should prepare for the possibility that Ryan could serve time, 3 to 6 months minimum." The reality of potential incarceration seemed to have finally penetrated the bubble of protection my parents had maintained around Ryan. Her voice carried genuine fear rather than the usual optimistic assurance that everything would work out. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it despite my complicated feelings about the situation. "How's Ryan handling the news?" "That's partly why I'm calling," she admitted. "He's been different since your conversation on Wednesday. More focused, less reactive. He asked me not to call you and said he needed to handle things himself, but—" She trailed off, uncertainty evident in her voice. "But what?" I prompted. "He's made a detailed plan for both potential outcomes, probation or incarceration, educational options, employment strategies, even a budget. It's like he's channeling you, Alex. When I asked what prompted this, he just said you'd helped him see things more clearly." Her description confirmed that Ryan had taken our conversation seriously, perhaps more seriously than I'd anticipated. It was a small but significant shift in his approach to consequences. The casual mention of my sacrificed future stung, though I kept my tone neutral. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." "Actually, that's the other reason I'm calling," she said, her voice shifting to a hesitancy I rarely heard from her. "We're struggling financially with these continuing legal expenses. I know it's a lot to ask, especially after everything. But we were wondering if you might have any savings you could contribute toward Ryan's legal defense." The request landed like a physical blow. Not only had they emptied my college fund, without consultation, now they were asking for additional financial support, without any acknowledgement of how I might be managing my own educational expenses. "Let me understand," I said slowly, fighting to keep my voice even. "You took my entire college fund for Ryan's legal fees. Now you're asking if I have additional money I could contribute?" "I know how it sounds," she said quickly. "But we're exploring every possible option to ensure Ryan gets the best defense. His future is at stake. And mine wasn't?" The words escaped before I could contain them. "Of course it was. Is. That's why we've been researching scholarship options and financial aid packages for you. Richard has some contacts at Lockwood who might be able to help with emergency funding." The irony was almost too much to bear. They were actively networking to find me financial assistance while simultaneously asking if I had resources to contribute to Ryan's defense. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. "I need to go," I said abruptly, unwilling to continue the conversation while maintaining my composure. I have a meeting in a few minutes. Alex, please, just think about it. Any amount would help at this point. I'll call you this weekend, I promised, not directly addressing her request. There's something I need to discuss with both you and Richard. After ending the call, I set my phone down with deliberate control, aware that Marcus was watching. Me with concern. Everything okay? He asked. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. They want to know if I have any savings I could contribute to Ryan's ongoing legal expenses. Apparently my college fund wasn't enough. Marcus's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. They can't be serious. Oh, they're entirely serious. And they've been researching scholarship options for me while simultaneously asking if I can help with Ryan's lawyer. The disconnect is almost impressive. What are you going to tell them? I considered the question, the pieces of a decision I'd been approaching all week finally clicking into place. The truth. Not all of it, but enough. They need to understand that their assumptions about my situation are fundamentally flawed. The Business Innovators interview is Monday, he reminded me. Timing is getting tight. I know. I'll call them tomorrow, arrange a video chat for Sunday. Better to have this conversation before the work week begins. As I prepared for bed that night, my thoughts churned with the approaching confrontation. The request for financial assistance had clarified one thing. My parents' perception of my capabilities had moved beyond reasonable expectation into something approaching exploitation. The assumption that I would not only accept the loss of my college fund, but potentially contribute additional resources to Ryan's defense, revealed how completely they misunderstood my situation. Sunday's conversation would correct that misunderstanding, not completely, but enough to reset boundaries and expectations. The revelation of CodeBridge's existence and success would necessarily shift family dynamics, potentially in unpredictable ways. But as I drifted towards sleep, one certainty remained. The careful separation I'd maintained between my business development and family obligations was about to collapse. The coming days would determine whether that integration would strengthen both realms or compromise the success I'd built independently. Either way, the days of being the invisible achiever, building an empire from dorm rooms while family attention focused elsewhere, were ending. And despite the anxiety that accompanied that realization, I felt a certain relief. Living a compartmentalized life had protected CodeBridge's development, but it had also required constant vigilance, a perpetual filtering of what could be shared and what must remain private. Perhaps it was time for worlds to collide. For my family to see not just the responsible daughter who would figure it out, but the successful entrepreneur who already had. Saturday morning arrived with the weight of anticipation. I'd texted both my mother and Richard, requesting a video call on Sunday afternoon to discuss some important developments. Their responses came quickly. My mother's filled with barely contained anxiety, Richard's with professional curtness. Both agreed to 2 p.m. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked as we finalized preparations for Monday's Business Innovators interview in our living room. Once you tell them about CodeBridge, there's no going back. They'll want details, involvement, and opinions. I'm not telling them everything, I clarified, reviewing our PR talking points. Just enough to establish that I have resources they're unaware of, and that asking me for additional financial support is inappropriate. Marcus looked skeptical. You know it won't end there, especially with Richard's corporate background. The moment he hears venture capital and valuation, he'll want to insert himself into the process. His concern wasn't unfounded. Richard's career in corporate development meant he approached every situation with an assessment of how he could optimize and control it. The revelation of CodeBridge's success would inevitably trigger his professional instincts. I can handle Richard, I assured him, with more confidence than I actually felt. This isn't about inviting their input. It's about correcting misconceptions, about my circumstances. Just be prepared for questions about why you kept it secret, he advised. That's going to be the hardest part to explain without triggering defensiveness. He was right, of course. The secrecy surrounding CodeBridge would seem calculating rather than protective once revealed. But that bridge would have to be crossed. Tomorrow. Today, we had more immediate concerns, finalizing our media strategy, preparing for Monday's interview, and drafting job descriptions for the expanded development team. We worked late into the evening, ordering pizza and reviewing every aspect of our launch plan. By midnight, we had a comprehensive strategy for the coming weeks, including contingency plans for various scenarios. The methodical preparation helped keep my thoughts from dwelling too much on Sunday's looming confrontation. "Get some rest," Marcus advised as we finally called it a night. "Tomorrow's conversation will be challenging enough without sleep deprivation." I nodded, though I doubted rest would come easily. "Thanks for your help with all this. Not just the business preparations, but the moral support for family drama," he supplied with a slight smile. "That's what partners are for. Besides, you'd do the same for me." It was true. Our friendship had evolved alongside our business partnership, each strengthening the other through shared challenges and achievements. In many ways, Marcus understood me better than my family ever had. He saw my capabilities without taking them for granted, recognized my drive without exploiting it. "That's good," I said simply. Taking responsibility for his situation is important, regardless of the legal outcome. Yes, but it's so unlike him. I'm worried it means he's given up hope of a favorable ruling, that he's resigned to serving time. I considered how to respond, aware that my mother was seeking reassurance I couldn't honestly provide. Or it means he's maturing, recognizing that hoping for the best doesn't preclude preparing for all possibilities. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this perspective. "Maybe you're right. It's just, everything feels like it's falling apart. Richard is working constantly, barely sleeping. The legal fees keep mounting despite using your college fund." Sunday morning passed with agonizing slowness. I reviewed my talking points repeatedly, refining how much to reveal and what boundaries to establish. By 1:30, I was sitting at my desk, computer set up for the video call, notes arranged neatly beside me. At precisely 2 p.m., my screen lit up with the incoming call. Taking a deep breath, I accepted, and my parents' faces appeared. My mother's pinched with worry, Richard's professionally neutral despite the family context. "Alex," my mother began immediately, "is everything all right? Your message sounded serious." "Everything's fine," I assured her, maintaining a calm demeanor. "But there are some developments you should be aware of, especially given our conversation Friday night." Richard leaned forward slightly, his business posture activating. "Developments regarding your education funding?" "In a way," I acknowledged. "But more broadly, developments about my professional situation." My mother's brow furrowed in confusion. "Professional situation? You're still in school." "Yes, but I've also been building something on the side for the past 3 years. Something that's recently reached a significant milestone." Richard's expression sharpened with interest. "A side project? What kind of project?" This was it. The moment of revelation I'd been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. I kept my voice, steady, factual rather than emotional. "A software company called CodeBridge. We've developed an integration platform that allows small and mid-sized businesses to connect their existing software systems without expensive custom solutions. Last week, we secured $1.2 million in venture capital funding at a $5.2 million valuation." The silence that followed was profound. My mother's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Richard remained perfectly still, his corporate mask momentarily slipping to reveal genuine surprise. "You started a company?" my mother finally managed. "While you were in school? And someone invested over $1 million in it?" "My business partner Marcus and I began development during sophomore year," I explained, maintaining my matter-of-fact tone. We've been building the platform, securing clients, and refining the product while completing our degrees. The venture capital agreement with Innotech was finalized last Monday. Richard recovered his composure first, professional instincts engaging as he processed this unexpected information. Innotech is a reputable firm, he noted, recognition in his voice. They don't invest without significant due diligence. This is substantial. Yes, it is, I agreed. Which brings me to why I wanted to have this conversation. Last week, when you asked if I had savings I could contribute to Ryan's legal defense, you were operating under a significant misconception about my financial situation. My mother's expression shifted to embarrassment mixed with lingering confusion. We had no idea you were involved in anything like this. Why didn't you tell us? The question was inevitable, yet still challenging to answer diplomatically. Initially, it was simply a student project with uncertain prospects. As it developed, I chose to focus on building it independently, without complications or distractions. Complications? Richard repeated, a slight edge entering his voice. You mean family input? Guidance from someone with actual business experience? And there it was, exactly the reaction Marcus had predicted. The immediate assumption that his involvement would have been beneficial rather than potentially undermining. I mean the freedom to develop according to our vision, rather than conventional corporate approaches, I clarified. CodeBridge's value. Proposition centers on user experience and accessibility, rather than maximizing immediate profit margins. That perspective might have been difficult to maintain with traditional corporate input. Richard's expression tightened, recognizing the implicit critique of his business philosophy. Venture capitalists aren't exactly known for their patience with minimal profit margins, Alex. They expect returns on investment. Which our business model provides, I countered smoothly. Just through sustainable growth and client retention, rather than aggressive pricing and upselling. Innotech invested specifically because they recognized the market potential of our approach. My mother, seemingly overwhelmed by the technical aspects of the conversation, steered it back to personal implications. So this means what exactly? You don't need the college fund anymore? You can cover your education expenses with this investment? The investment is for business development, I explained. But yes, I've allocated a portion of my founder's distribution to cover my final semester at Lockwood. The MBA program may need to wait until CodeBridge is more established, but my undergraduate degree is secured. Relief flooded her face, quickly followed by a hesitant optimism. That's wonderful news, Alex. Why didn't you tell us this when we first discussed the college fund situation? We've been so worried about how you would manage. The question revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of the sequence of events and of my feelings about their decision. Because at that point, the investment wasn't finalized, I replied evenly. And more importantly, because it shouldn't have been necessary. The college fund was established for my education. The fact that I had an alternative resource doesn't justify the unilateral decision to reallocate it. Richard shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the legitimate criticism. We were facing an emergency situation with limited options. Decisions had to be made quickly. I understand the circumstances, I acknowledged. But there's a difference between explaining a difficult decision and suggesting it was acceptable because I could figure something out. That assumption has been applied to me consistently throughout our family dynamic, and it needs to stop. My direct address of the pattern momentarily silenced both of them. Perhaps they'd never fully recognized the disparity in expectations between Ryan and me, or perhaps they'd never heard it articulated so explicitly. We've always believed in your capabilities, my mother finally said, her voice small. That wasn't meant to be a burden. Belief becomes a burden when it's used to justify withholding support, I responded, gentler now but still firm. I'm not asking for apologies or explanations about past decisions. I'm establishing clarity about my current situation and boundaries moving forward. Richard, ever the pragmatist, seemed eager to move past emotional territory to practical considerations. This company of yours, CodeBridge, is it preparing for a market launch? Yes. There's a feature article in next month's Business Innovators magazine. The public announcement of Innotech's investment goes out Tuesday. We're opening offices in the Harrington Building downtown next week. His eyebrows raised at the mention of the prominent business publication. Business Innovators? That's significant exposure. When is the interview? Tomorrow, I replied. Which is another reason I wanted to have this conversation today. I didn't want you learning about CodeBridge from a magazine article or press release. I appreciate that consideration, he said, a note of genuine respect entering his voice. This is impressive, Alex. Truly. Starting a viable tech company while maintaining your academic standing is no small achievement. The acknowledgement, while professional rather than personal, still represented a shift in his perception. For perhaps the first time he was seeing me not as a responsible student who would figure things out, but as a business founder who had already figured something out, something substantial. Thank you, I said simply. It's been challenging but rewarding work. My mother, who had been relatively quiet as the business aspects were discussed, spoke up again. Does this mean you'll be staying in New Hampshire after graduation? Not coming back to Massachusetts? The question carried layers of maternal concern beneath the practical inquiry about location. Was I pulling away completely? Would this business success translate to even greater distance from family? For now, yes. CodeBridge's operations will be based here initially, but that decision is about business requirements, not family dynamics. She nodded, clearly processing implications beyond the literal answer. And Ryan? He's been asking about you since your conversation Wednesday. This will change how he sees things too. I plan to call him after we talk, I assured her. I'll explain the situation directly. Richard leaned forward again, his expression shifting from impressed to calculating. Have you considered the potential synergies between CodeBridge and established integration providers? With my industry connections, I could arrange introductions to several companies that might be interested in strategic partnerships. And there it was, exactly what Marcus had predicted. The immediate attempt to insert himself into CodeBridge's business development, to apply his corporate network and perspective to what we had deliberately built as an alternative to conventional approaches. Thank you for the offer, I replied, diplomatically. But our partnership strategy is already established as part of the Innotech agreement. We're focusing on building direct client relationships rather than corporate alliances at this stage. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, quickly masked by professional acceptance. Of course, just something to consider for future growth phases. I'll keep it in mind, I said, knowing I wouldn't. CodeBridge's independence from traditional corporate structures was central to its identity and appeal. As the conversation continued, I provided general information about the business, while carefully avoiding specifics that might invite unwanted input. My mother asked questions about my schedule, workload, and whether I was taking care of myself amidst these developments. Richard probed for details about revenue projections, market positioning, and competitive analysis, questions I deflected with practiced vagueness. After about 40 minutes, I began to steer the conversation toward conclusion. I should go. We have final preparations for tomorrow's interview, and I still need to call Ryan. Of course, my mother said quickly. This is all, well, it's surprising but wonderful, Alex. We're very proud of what you've accomplished. Indeed, Richard added. Building a venture-backed company while completing your degree shows exceptional capability and drive. Their praise, while genuine, carried a hint of retroactive justification, as if my success validated their decision to withdraw support, confirming I could indeed figure things out on my own. I let it pass without comment. The dynamics that had shaped our family relationships wouldn't change overnight, regardless of revelations about CodeBridge. "Thank you," I said simply. "I'll keep you updated on major developments, and I'll see you at Ryan's hearing on Thursday." After ending the call, I sat for several minutes, processing the interaction. It had gone largely as expected. Initial shock, followed by genuine admiration mixed with attempts to assert parental or professional involvement. I'd maintained boundaries, while revealing enough to reset expectations about my circumstances. Not perfect, but functional. Next came the call to Ryan, which carried different complexities. His recent introspection and request for guidance had established a tentative new dynamic between us. How would the revelation of CodeBridge affect that fragile connection? I dialed his number, prepared for various reactions. "Alex?" he answered, on the second ring. "I didn't expect to hear from you today." "I just finished a video call with Mom and Richard," I explained. "There's something you should know, especially given our conversation Wednesday." "Sounds serious," he noted, a wariness entering his voice. "Not serious in a bad way," I assured him, "but it will change how you understand my situation." I proceeded to explain CodeBridge, the development, the investment, the upcoming launch, in terms similar to what I'd shared with our parents. Unlike them, Ryan's response was immediate and uncomplicated. "Holy shit, Alex. You've been building a multi-million-dollar company from your dorm room while I've been screwing up my life? That's kind of awesome and incredibly intimidating at the same time." His honest reaction startled a laugh from me. "It's not quite that dramatic. CodeBridge has potential, but we're still early in the growth phase. Still, venture capital investment while finishing college, that's legitimately impressive." He paused, then added in a more subdued tone, "Makes my request for guidance on becoming more responsible seem even more needed. I'm over here facing possible jail time while you're closing million-dollar business deals." "Different paths, different challenges," I said, not wanting to reinforce the comparison that had always positioned him as the family disappointment. "Your recognition of patterns you want to change is significant progress, regardless of what I've been doing professionally." "Maybe," he acknowledged, "but finding out your stepsister is secretly a tech entrepreneur definitely adds perspective." Another pause, then, "Does this change things between us? The advice you were willing to give?" The question revealed a vulnerability I hadn't expected, concern that my revealed success might alter our tentative new connection. Perhaps he feared I'd now see him as even less worthy of guidance or support. "Not at all," I assured him. "If anything, it means I can be more transparent about how I've approached challenges. No more filtered versions of my experience." "I'd like that," he said, genuine relief in his voice. "The unfiltered version sounds a lot more useful than whatever sanitized family narrative we've been operating with." His perspective was surprisingly mature, a continuation of the reflection he'd demonstrated in our previous conversation. Perhaps the legal crisis had indeed catalyzed genuine growth. "So, about your hearing Thursday," I transitioned, wanting to acknowledge the more immediate concern in his life. "Have you finalized your contingency plans for both potential outcomes?" "Working on it," he confirmed. "For probation, I've researched 3 treatment programs with strong success rates. For incarceration, that's harder to plan for, but I'm looking at education options that can be pursued remotely or resumed after release." The concrete steps represented significant progress from his usual avoidance of consequences. "That's good, proactive planning. Have you discussed these with your lawyer?" "Yesterday. He says it shows commitment to rehabilitation that might influence the judge's decision." A note of cautious hope entered his voice. "It might not change the outcome, but at least I'm not just passively waiting anymore." "That's the most important shift," I affirmed. "Regardless of what happens Thursday, maintaining that proactive approach will serve you well." We talked for another 20 minutes, his questions now more specific and practical. how to rebuild credibility, manage potential employment barriers. With a record, establish financial independence when starting from a deficit. I offered honest guidance without sugarcoating challenges, and he received it without defensiveness. It was perhaps the most authentic exchange we'd ever had. "Thanks, Alex," he said as we concluded, "for the advice and for telling me about CodeBridge. Yourself instead of letting me find out from Mom and Richard. Of course. Family complications aside, I've always respected your intelligence. You deserve direct communication." After we hung up, I rejoined Marcus in the living room, where he was finalizing his portion of the Business Innovators interview preparation. "How did the big reveal go?" he asked, looking up from his notes. "About as expected with my parents," I reported, dropping onto the couch. Shock, then adjustment, then immediate attempts to insert themselves into the process. Especially Richard, with his corporate connections and strategic partnership suggestions. Marcus laughed. "Called it. And Ryan?" "Surprisingly well. He was genuinely impressed without being resentful and still wants guidance on becoming more responsible. If anything, knowing about CodeBridge seems to have increased his respect rather than triggered envy." "Interesting. Maybe his legal situation has actually forced some genuine maturity." "Maybe," I agreed. "The Ryan from 6 months ago would have responded very differently." We returned to preparation for Monday's interview, but my thoughts kept drifting to the transformed family dynamics now in motion. The careful separation I'd maintained between my professional development and family relationships had collapsed. For better or worse, those worlds were now interconnected. The coming weeks would reveal whether that integration strengthened both realms or introduced complications I hadn't anticipated. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of professional excitement and personal apprehension. The Business Innovators interview represented CodeBridge's first major media exposure, a significant milestone in our transition from student project to recognized industry player. Yet, it also marked the beginning of public visibility that would further erode the boundary between my carefully compartmentalized worlds. The interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Innotech's offices, providing a professional backdrop that emphasized their endorsement of our venture. Marcus and I arrived early, reviewing talking points with Vanessa while the media team set up recording equipment. "Remember, this isn't just about the technology," Vanessa advised as we waited. "Business Innovators readers connect with the human story behind innovations. Your journey as student entrepreneurs is compelling. Use it to make CodeBridge relatable without undermining its technical credibility." It was solid advice, echoing the PR strategy we'd developed together. The challenge would be sharing enough of our background to create authentic connection without revealing the recent family complications that might distract from CodeBridge's market positioning. When Jennifer Reeves, the Business Innovators senior tech correspondent, arrived, she immediately set a conversational tone that helped ease my residual tension. "I've been reviewing the materials Innotech provided," she said, as we settled into the arranged seating area. "What you've built addresses a pain point I've heard repeatedly from small business owners. How did you identify this specific gap in the market?" The question allowed us to begin with CodeBridge's origin story, how a class project revealed the integration challenges facing businesses without enterprise-level IT resources, and how our initial solution evolved through direct feedback from local business owners. As the interview progressed, Jennifer asked thoughtful questions about our development process, business model, and vision for industry impact. She seemed genuinely interested in the technical aspects while also drawing out the personal elements of our journey. "Building a venture-backed company while completing undergraduate degrees is unusual," she noted about halfway through. "What sacrifices did that dual focus require? And how did your families respond to this entrepreneurial path alongside traditional education?" The question touched directly on territory I'd hoped to avoid, yet couldn't reasonably dodge without seeming evasive. I opted for a carefully edited truth. Balance was certainly challenging, I acknowledged. Social activities often took a back seat to development sprints and client meetings. As for family response, they're just learning about CodeBridge's full scope now that we've secured investment and are preparing for an official launch. We kept the project relatively private during development to maintain focus and independent vision. Jennifer looked intrigued by this detail. So this was something of a stealth operation until recently? That's unusual in an age where most young entrepreneurs are building personal brands alongside their companies. We prioritized product development over personal visibility, Marcus explained smoothly. Ensuring CodeBridge solved real problems effectively was more important than early recognition. A refreshingly substance-over-style approach, Jennifer noted approvingly, though I imagine your families were surprised to learn you'd built a venture-backed company without their knowledge. Pleasantly surprised, I confirmed with a diplomatic smile. They're supportive of our success, even if the path wasn't what they might have expected. The answer seemed to satisfy her, and the interview moved on to future development plans and market strategy. By the time we concluded, we'd covered all the key messages InnoTech wanted highlighted while maintaining a conversational authenticity that would resonate with readers. That went extremely well, Vanessa said after Jennifer and her team departed. You both presented as confident, knowledgeable founders with a clear vision. The feature should position CodeBridge exactly as we've planned. When will it be published? I asked, already considering potential family reactions to the article. Next Wednesday's issue, with digital release the evening before. We'll receive an advance copy Monday for final review, though only factual corrections would be considered at that stage. 1 week from tomorrow. The timing meant CodeBridge's public profile would emerge immediately after Ryan's hearing, a strange confluence of family crisis and professional advancement. The juxtaposition felt symbolic of the divergent paths our lives had taken, particularly since the college fund decision. As Marcus and I left InnoTech's offices, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Thinking of you and your interview today. I hope it went well. We're still processing everything you shared yesterday, but wanted you to know we're proud of what you've built. The message was typically maternal, supportive while acknowledging the emotional complexity of our situation. I appreciated the sentiment, even as I recognized it represented only the beginning of a necessary recalibration in our relationship. From your family? Marcus guessed, noting my expression as I read the text. My mother, I confirmed. General supportiveness without specific understanding. He nodded knowingly. Standard parent response to situations outside their experience. At least it's positive. True. And right now, with everything else happening, being positive is enough. We spent the rest of the day in meetings with the commercial real estate agent finalizing details for our office space and interviewing additional candidates for the development team. The practical tasks provided welcome focus, keeping my thoughts from dwelling too much on Thursday's approaching hearing and the family dynamics it would inevitably highlight. By evening, exhaustion from the intense day had settled in, making it easier to push aside concerns about my separate but now connected worlds. As I prepared for bed, I realized that despite the complications introduced by revealing CodeBridge to my family, there was a certain relief in no longer maintaining the strict compartmentalization of my life. Whatever challenges emerged from this new integrated reality, at least they would be faced authentically, without the constant vigilance of filtering what could be shared and what must remain hidden. That alone represented progress, even if the path forward remained uncertain. The next 3 days passed, in a blur of business activity. Tuesday brought the official press release announcing InnoTech's investment, generating industry attention and a flurry of inquiries from potential clients and partners. Wednesday focused on finalizing the office, set up and onboarding our first new hires, and through it all, Thursday's hearing loomed, the culmination of the crisis that had exposed fundamental truths about my family's dynamics and priorities. By Wednesday evening, as I packed an overnight bag for the trip back to Massachusetts, the reality of these converging worlds felt increasingly surreal. Tomorrow, I would sit in a courtroom supporting the stepbrother whose legal troubles had led to the emphasization of my college fund, while simultaneously fielding emails about CodeBridge's expanding business opportunities. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very situation that had threatened my educational future had accelerated the revelation of my professional success, catalyzing a transformation in family perceptions that might otherwise have evolved more gradually. As I zipped my bag closed, I wondered what tomorrow would bring, not just in terms of Ryan's legal outcome, but in the continuing evolution of our complex family system. Whatever happened, one thing was certain. The days of being underestimated and taken for granted were over. For better or worse, my family now knew exactly what I was capable of building while they weren't looking. Thursday morning dawned gray and drizzly, the weather matching the somber occasion. I'd arrived in Westbridge late the previous night, checking into a hotel rather than staying at my parents' house. The decision wasn't just practical given the early court time, it was a deliberate boundary, a physical manifestation of my new relationship with family, connected but separate. The courthouse was an imposing brick building in downtown Westbridge, its weathered facade speaking to decades of judgments rendered within its walls. I arrived 30 minutes early, coffee in hand, and found my mother and Richard already waiting in the lobby, huddled together in tense conversation. "Alex," my mother said when she spotted me, relief evident in her voice. "You made it." She moved as if to hug me, then hesitated, uncertain of my receptiveness. I closed the distance between us, allowing a brief embrace. Whatever complications existed in our relationship, today was about supporting Ryan through a difficult experience. "Any updates from the lawyer?" I asked, turning to include Richard in the conversation. He shook his head, the strain of recent weeks evident in the new lines around his eyes. "He's with Ryan now, reviewing the final strategy. The prosecutor hasn't budged on seeking jail time, but Judge Winters historically favors rehabilitation for first-time offenders." The factual assessment couldn't fully mask the worry beneath. Despite his corporate demeanor, Richard genuinely cared for his son, even if his parenting approach had contributed to Ryan's pattern of poor choices. "Ryan's plans for both potential outcomes are solid," I offered. "That should help demonstrate commitment to change regardless of the ruling." Richard nodded, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "Yes, his preparation has been unexpected, more structured than his usual approach." He hesitated, then added, "Your influence, I assume." It wasn't quite an acknowledgement of the unhealthy family dynamic, but it was closer than I'd expected. Ryan did the work himself. I just suggested a framework. Before we could continue, the courthouse doors opened, and Ryan appeared with his attorney, both in conservative suits that seemed at odds with my stepbrother's usual casual style. The formal attire and Ryan's solemn expression made him appear older, more mature than the impulsive 20-year-old who had consistently been rescued from consequences. He approached us, nodding a greeting. "They're ready for us. Courtroom 3. As we moved toward the designated room, Ryan fell into step beside me, slightly separated from our parents. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "I know things are complicated. Family shows up for important moments," I replied simply, regardless of complications. He gave me a quick, grateful glance before we entered the courtroom. Inside, the proceedings moved with the efficient formality of routine legal business. The charges were read, statements made by both attorneys, evidence presented in clinical terms that stripped the situation of emotional context. Throughout it all, Ryan sat straight-backed beside his lawyer, responding respectfully when addressed, his demeanor suggesting someone taking the process seriously rather than awaiting rescue. My mother clutched Richard's hand, her knuckles white with tension. Richard maintained his corporate mask, though the occasional tightening around his jaw betrayed his anxiety. When Ryan was invited to address the court before sentencing, he rose steadily, facing the judge directly. Your Honor, I take full responsibility for my actions and the poor decisions that led to them. I understand the seriousness of these charges and the impact distribution has on communities and individuals. His voice was clear, lacking the defensive tone that had characterized so many of his previous explanations for mistakes. I've developed concrete plans for rehabilitation and am committed to making meaningful changes, whether through the structure of probation or during incarceration. The simple statement, delivered without excuses or deflection, represented a significant shift from his typical approach to consequences. As he returned to his seat, I caught his eye and offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Judge Winters studied Ryan thoughtfully before delivering her decision. Mr. Thompson, the charges before me today carry serious penalties, as distribution of controlled substances represents a significant threat to public safety. Her tone was firm, but not harsh. However, I also consider factors including first, offense status, demonstrated remorse, and rehabilitation potential. She paused, reviewing the documents before her. In this case, I find compelling the concrete steps you've taken toward addressing the underlying issues that contributed to these offenses. Your lawyer has provided evidence of research into treatment, programs, and educational opportunities that suggest genuine commitment to change. My mother's grip on Richard's hand tightened visibly as the judge continued. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 3 years probation with the following conditions: completion of the Riverside Addiction Treatment Program, 500 hours of community service focused on substance abuse prevention, regular drug testing, and education or employment requirements as determined by your probation officer. The relief in the room was palpable. Ryan remained composed, thanking the judge respectfully when she concluded. Only the slight tremor in his hands as he gathered his papers revealed the emotion beneath his controlled exterior. Outside the courtroom, my mother embraced Ryan tearfully while Richard clasped his shoulder with unusual expressiveness. "You handled yourself well in there," he said, pride evident in his voice. "The judge recognized your sincerity." Ryan nodded, accepting their support while maintaining the more mature demeanor he'd displayed throughout the hearing. When they stepped away to speak with the attorney about next steps, he turned to me. "I meant what I said in there," he said quietly, "about taking responsibility and making changes." "I know," I replied, recognizing the authenticity in his commitment. "And for what it's worth, I think the judge made the right call. You'll do more good implementing those plans outside of incarceration." He exhaled slowly, weeks of tension finally easing. "The Riverside program starts Monday. Intensive outpatient, but still structured, 4 days a week initially." "That tracks with what I've read about their approach," I noted, impressed by his research. "Their outcomes for participants who complete the full program are among the best in the state." "You looked them up?" he asked, surprised. "Of course. After our conversation, I wanted to understand what you might be facing." It was a simple truth. Despite our complicated history, his genuine effort to change warranted reciprocal engagement. A small smile touched his features. The tech CEO's stepsister still made time to research rehab programs for the screw-up brother. Former. "Screw-up," I corrected gently. "Current rehabilitation participant?" Our conversation was interrupted by my mother, who approached with barely contained emotion. "The lawyer says we need to meet with the probation department to finalize details. But first, I think we all need lunch. This morning has been overwhelming." The suggestion of a family meal would have seemed routine just weeks ago. Now it carried weight. Would our newly reconfigured relationship survive the intimate setting of a shared table? The question must have shown on my face because my mother added tentatively, "Unless you need to get back to New Hampshire right away?" "I can stay for lunch," I decided. This new phase of family dynamics would need to be navigated eventually. Perhaps beginning in the context of Ryan's positive outcome would provide solid footing. We settled on a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. the kind of place that catered to legal professionals and family members processing court experiences. Once seated, an awkward silence descended, none of us quite sure how to bridge the multiple revelations and shifts of recent weeks. Ryan, surprisingly, took the lead. "I want to thank all of you for your support today, but especially you, Alex." He turned to face me directly. "Not just for showing up, but for helping me see things differently when everyone else was still treating me like I couldn't handle the truth." The explicit acknowledgement of our family's pattern caught my mother and Richard off guard. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, unused to such direct addressing of dynamics usually left unspoken. "You did the hard work," I replied. "I just offered perspective." "Perspective no one else provided," he noted pointedly. "Because they were too busy protecting me from consequences to consider I might actually need to face them." Richard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with this assessment, but not immediately contradicting it. "Recent events have highlighted certain patterns that may have been counterproductive," he admitted carefully. "Intentions were positive, but outcomes suggest reconsideration is warranted." It was perhaps the closest he would come to acknowledging the problematic dynamic, corporate language applied to family dysfunction, but still represented significant reflection. My mother's approach was more emotional, less guarded. "We wanted to shield you from difficulties," she said to Ryan, eyes bright with unshed tears. "But in doing so, we may have prevented you from developing the strength to overcome them." She turned to me. "And we took for granted your ability to handle challenges, expecting you to manage without the support we readily gave elsewhere." The acknowledgement, though simplistic, represented a first step toward genuine understanding. I nodded, accepting the limited recognition without demanding more extensive processing. "Moving forward is more important than rehashing past patterns," I offered. "We have new information now about circumstances, capabilities, and needs. The question is how we adjust accordingly." Meaning? Richard prompted businessman instincts engaging with this solution-focused approach. "Meaning we establish new patterns based on demonstrated reality rather than assumed roles," I explained. "Ryan is showing capacity for responsibility and consequences. I've revealed professional development that changes assumptions about my circumstances. These realities should inform how we function as a family going forward." Ryan nodded emphatically. "No more automatic rescues or expectations of self-sufficiency. Actual assessment of situations and appropriate responses." His articulation of the needed change surprised me, further evidence of genuine reflection beyond the immediate legal concerns. My mother looked between us, a new awareness in her expression. "You've both grown so much in such different ways. Maybe it's time we grew too, in how we parent adult children." It wasn't a comprehensive solution to years of unbalanced family dynamics, but it was an opening, an acknowledgement that change was necessary and possible. As lunch continued, the conversation gradually shifted to more immediate concerns. Ryan's treatment program, my upcoming Business Innovators article, and practical aspects of our evolving lives. By the time we parted, outside the restaurant something had subtly shifted. The old patterns hadn't disappeared, but they had been named, acknowledged as problematic, rather than accepted as inevitable. Whether this recognition would translate to sustained change remained to be seen, but the foundation had been laid, as I prepared to drive back to New Hampshire. Ryan walked me to my car. "This isn't over, you know," he said seriously. "Not the legal stuff, not the family dynamics, not the process of actually changing patterns instead of just talking about them." "I know," I acknowledged. "Lasting change is incremental, not immediate. But it is possible," he insisted, a determination in his voice I hadn't heard before. "For all of us." I studied him thoughtfully, recognizing the genuine shift beneath his words. The crisis that had begun with my college fund being emptied for his legal defense had catalyzed unexpected growth. For him, for me, for our family. System, Yes, I finally agreed. It is possible. Difficult, but possible. As I drove away from Westbridge, returning to the business responsibilities awaiting me in New Hampshire, I reflected on the strange journey of recent weeks. What had begun as a betrayal of my future had ultimately accelerated its emergence. The family decision that had threatened my education had inadvertently revealed my professional achievement, forcing recognition of capabilities previously taken for granted. And somehow, paradoxically, the same crisis had sparked genuine change in the stepbrother who had consistently benefited from the unequal family system. Ryan's legal troubles had created space for reflection impossible under the previous pattern of rescue and excuse. The road ahead remained complex for all of us. Ryan faced the structured demands of probation and treatment. My parents confronted the necessity of adjusting long-established patterns. And I navigated the increasingly public success of Codebridge alongside newly reconfigured family relationships. Yet for the first time, we were moving forward with shared awareness of realities, previously unacknowledged or obscured. That transparency alone represented significant progress, a foundation upon which healthier connections might gradually be built. 8 months later, the Meridian Building's rooftop garden offered a spectacular view of downtown. Spring had arrived, in full force, coating the city in vibrant greens and colorful blooms that contrasted beautifully with the sleek glass and steel of the business district. I adjusted the table settings one last time, making sure everything was perfect for tonight's dinner. "You know they won't care about the fancy plates, right?" Marcus commented, emerging from the rooftop access door with a bottle of champagne. "Your family will be too busy being impressed by the office space 10 floors below to notice your table-setting skills." I smiled, acknowledging the truth in his observation. It's not about impressing them. It's about marking the occasion properly. The occasion was significant indeed. Codebridge had just closed our Series A funding round, securing $8.5 million at a $27 million valuation. The growth we'd achieved in 8 months had exceeded even our ambitious projections, with client acquisition rates double our initial targets, and a development team that had expanded from 3 to 17. "Fair enough," Marcus conceded, placing the champagne in an ice bucket. "Milestone celebrations deserve proper attention to detail." He glanced at his watch. "They should be arriving at the office soon. Do you want me to greet them while you finish?" "Up here?" "That would be great," I agreed. "Just bring them directly to the roof once you've given the tour." After he left, I made one final adjustment to the table and stepped back to survey the setup. The private rooftop garden had been one of the selling points when we'd moved Codebridge's operations to the Meridian Building 3 months ago. Tonight would be its first use for a formal gathering, a dinner celebrating both business success and transformed family relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Just parked. Mom's already talking about how proud she is. Brace yourself." For maximum maternal emotion. I smiled at his casual humor, another sign of how much had changed. In the months since his hearing, Ryan had completed the intensive phase of his treatment program, maintained perfect compliance with probation requirements, and enrolled in community college courses focused on addiction counseling. The transformation wasn't just in his external behaviors, but in his perspective, a genuine maturity that had emerged from facing consequences directly. My own journey had been equally transformative, though along a different axis. Innovators feature had generated significant attention for Codebridge, accelerating our growth trajectory and establishing us as leaders in the small business integration space. Managing that rapid expansion while completing my final semester at Lockwood had required intense focus and strategic delegation. I'd graduated 2 weeks ago, my business success providing a unique perspective on the achievement. The degree represented important knowledge acquisition and formal credential completion, but my professional identity had already solidified around Codebridge's leadership. The tassel turning was meaningful, but secondary to the company milestones we'd been achieving. My phone buzzed again. Marcus this time. "They've arrived. Your mother is already taking pictures of everything. ETA to roof, 15 minutes. I smiled, picturing my mother documenting every detail of the office space she'd only previously seen in photos and video calls. Her relationship with my success had evolved gradually over the past months, from initial surprised pride to genuine interest in understanding what I'd built. The weekly calls we'd established had helped bridge the distance, both geographical and emotional, that had developed during college. Richard's engagement had followed a different pattern. After his initial attempts to insert himself into CodeBridge's business strategy had been gently but firmly redirected, he'd found a more appropriate role as occasional sounding board rather than active advisor. Our conversations now acknowledged the boundary between parental relationship and professional respect, a distinction that had been absent in the college fund decision. The door to the rooftop opened, and Marcus emerged with my family in tow. My mother looking emotional yet composed, Richard professionally impressed, and Ryan casually confident in a way that still sometimes surprised me. "Alex!" My mother hurried forward for a hug. "The office is absolutely amazing. All those developers working on those complicated screens. It's exactly like a real tech company from the movies." I returned her embrace, amused by her description. "It is a real tech company, Mom, just not usually quite as dramatic as the Hollywood versions." "You know what I mean," she said, pulling back to examine me with maternal scrutiny. "You look tired but good. Are you eating properly with all this business expansion happening?" Some patterns never completely changed, regardless of professional achievement. "I'm fine. The team ordered too much food for lunch today, actually." Richard approached next, extending his hand professionally before shifting to a brief, somewhat awkward hug. "The operation is impressive, Alex. Efficient layout, good energy among the team. The growth metrics Marcus shared are exceptional for this stage." "Thank you," I acknowledged, appreciating that his assessment came from genuine business acumen rather than automatic parental praise. "The market response has validated our approach to integration challenges." Ryan completed the family greeting with a casual shoulder bump. "Look at you, tech mogul with a rooftop garden. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to figure out how to keep a houseplant alive in my apartment." "The garden came with the building," I clarified, returning his easy smile. "My plant nurturing skills remain limited to automated watering systems." "Smart solution to a biological challenge. Very on brand," he teased. As we settled around the table, Marcus opened the champagne, pouring glasses for everyone. "A toast," he proposed, "to CodeBridge's Series A closing and to family celebrations." We raised our glasses, the simple acknowledgement bridging both professional achievement and personal connection. As dinner progressed, catered by the upscale restaurant on the Meridian's ground floor, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years, perhaps ever. "How are your courses going?" I asked Ryan as we moved from appetizers to main courses. "Challenging but good," he replied thoughtfully. "The psychology requirements are intense, but they're helping me understand my own patterns better. And the Addiction Studies program has practical components that connect directly to my community service work." "You're volunteering beyond the required hours now, right?" I recalled from our recent phone conversations. He nodded. 2 additional days at the youth prevention program. The coordinator thinks I might have a shot at a paid position there once my community service hours are completed." "That's excellent news," my mother interjected warmly. "They've mentioned how well you connect with the teenagers in the program. Lived experience has its advantages," Ryan acknowledged with a self-awareness that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "They can tell the difference between someone who's reading from a pamphlet and someone who's actually been through it." Richard, who had been quieter on the topic of Ryan's recovery work, spoke up with uncharacteristic openness. "I've been impressed by your commitment to the process, son. The consistency you've shown with the program requirements and the additional volunteering demonstrates real change." The direct praise, delivered without qualifications or comparisons, visibly affected Ryan. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." My mother turned to me, smoothly shifting the conversation. And what about the MBA program you were considering? Now that you've graduated, is that still in your plans? It was a reasonable question, though one I'd been reconsidering in light of CodeBridge's accelerated growth. I'm deferring for at least another year. With the Series A funding, we're entering a critical scaling phase that requires my full attention. The MBA curriculum will still be there when the timing is better. A practical decision, Richard observed, approvingly. The experiential education you're gaining through active business leadership likely exceeds what you'd get in even the best MBA program right now. His acknowledgement of the value in my chosen path, so different from his traditional corporate trajectory, represented significant evolution in his perspective. 8 months ago, he would have automatically prioritized formal credentials over practical experience, regardless of circumstances. That's what I've concluded, I agreed. The networks and theoretical frameworks would be valuable, but the immediate applied learning from scaling CodeBridge provides more relevant development at this stage. As dinner continued, Marcus shared technical aspects of our recent platform expansion, explaining in accessible terms how we were addressing the integration challenges faced by growing businesses. My mother asked thoughtful questions about our client successes, while Richard engaged on market positioning and competitive differentiation. The conversation felt balanced, professional achievements acknowledged without overshadowing personal connections, family support offered without attempting to control outcomes. It was the healthiest dynamic we'd ever established, though still evolving and occasionally slipping into old patterns that required gentle redirection. When dessert arrived, Ryan tapped his glass gently for attention. "I'd like to say something, if that's okay." His expression was serious but not somber, suggesting something meaningful rather than concerning. We all focused on him, curious about this unexpected moment. A year ago, I was spiraling in ways I barely recognized, making decisions that nearly destroyed my future and damaged our family. I was operating under patterns none of us fully acknowledged, expecting rescue, avoiding consequences, taking support for granted. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When everything came to a head with my arrest and the college fund situation, it forced recognition that couldn't be ignored or minimized. That crisis became a turning point, not just for me but for all of us. My mother's eyes glistened with emotion as Ryan continued. "I'm 8 months into probation and treatment now. My counselor talks about making amends as part of the recovery process, acknowledging harm done and taking concrete steps to address it when possible." He turned to face me directly. "Alex, I can't restore the college fund that was taken for my legal defense, but I can acknowledge the inequity it represents and commit to a different path forward." From his pocket, he withdrew an envelope and placed it on the table between us. "This is the first payment. It's not much, just a portion of what I've earned from my part-time job at the campus bookstore. But it's a beginning, a tangible commitment, to eventually restore what was taken, even if it takes years." The gesture caught me completely by surprise. "Ryan, that's not necessary. I've secured my education funding through CodeBridge. The financial impact has been addressed." "It's not about the practical need," he explained earnestly. "It's about the principle, acknowledging that what happened wasn't right and taking personal responsibility for making it right, regardless of your current circumstances." His perspective revealed how deeply he'd internalized the concepts of accountability and amends, not superficial apologies, but concrete actions to address past wrongs. It was perhaps the most significant evidence of genuine change I'd witnessed in him. "Thank you," I said simply, accepting the envelope with the respect his gesture deserved. "This means a lot." My mother wiped away tears that had begun to fall. "I think we all have amends to make in different ways," she said softly. "The patterns that led to that decision weren't created in isolation, and the responsibility doesn't fall solely on Ryan." Richard nodded, an unusual emotion visible in his expression. We made parenting decisions that reinforced unhealthy patterns. For both of you, different patterns, but equally problematic in their own ways. That recognition has been difficult, but necessary. The open acknowledgement of the systemic family issues represented significant progress from the defensive justifications that had characterized our early discussions about the college fund. Not complete resolution, that would require ongoing work and consistent new patterns, but a foundation for healthier relationships moving forward. I think what matters most is that we're establishing new patterns now, I offered. Learning from past mistakes rather than repeating them. Speaking of new patterns, Marcus interjected gently, sensing the need for a slight shift in emotional intensity. Should we tell them about the expansion plans? I smiled, grateful for his intuitive timing. We just signed the lease for Codebridge's second office location. We're opening a Seattle branch in September to better serve our West Coast clients. Seattle, my mother exclaimed. That's so far away. Will you be relocating? No, I'll remain based here, I assured her. But I'll be traveling there regularly during the setup phase. Marcus will oversee the technical infrastructure while I focus on client relationships and team development. Expansion to a second major market within a year of formal launch is exceptional, Richard noted, professional assessment mixing with parental pride. The Series A timing aligns perfectly with this growth phase. The conversation shifted to business, logistics, and West Coast opportunities, providing a natural transition from the emotional intensity of Ryan's gesture. As the evening progressed, I observed the subtle but significant changes in our family interactions, the increased self-awareness, the more balanced attention, the explicit acknowledgement of past patterns alongside commitments to new approaches. After dinner, we moved to the comfortable seating area at the edge of the rooftop garden, overlooking the city lights now twinkling against the darkening sky. The conversation flowed easily between business developments, Ryan's education plans, and my parents' updates from Westbridge. As the evening drew to a close, my mother helped me clear the dessert dishes while Ryan and Richard discussed the community, college's addiction counseling certification requirements with Marcus. I'm so proud of you, Alex, she said quietly as we worked. Not just for the business success, impressive as it is, but for how you've handled everything this past year. The strength and grace you've shown through all these changes. It's remarkable. Her words carried a depth of understanding that hadn't been present in earlier expressions of pride. This wasn't the automatic maternal approval of achievements, but recognition of the personal growth that had accompanied professional development. Thank you, I replied simply. It's been a challenging year for all of us in different ways. She nodded, glancing toward Ryan and Richard. Your brother has found direction I wasn't sure was possible, and your stepfather has been reconsidering many of his long-held perspectives, both professionally and personally. The observation aligned with changes I'd noticed in their individual communications over recent months. Richard's business advice had become less prescriptive, more exploratory. Ryan's updates had shifted from crisis management to purposeful planning. And you? I asked gently. How has this year been for you? She considered the question thoughtfully. Illuminating. Painful at times, but ultimately clarifying. I've had to recognize patterns in my parenting that contributed to difficulties for both of you, though in opposite ways. She looked at me directly. I relied too heavily on your capability, Alex. Celebrated it while simultaneously taking it for granted, in ways that weren't fair to you. The acknowledgement, delivered without defensive qualifications, represented significant reflection and growth on her part. We're all learning, I offered. The important thing is that we're moving in healthier directions now. As we rejoined, the conversation turned to future plans. Codebridge's development roadmap, Ryan's path toward addiction counseling certification, and potential family gatherings in the coming months. The discussions held a quality of balanced engagement that contrasted sharply with the uneven dynamics of previous years. When it was time for them to leave, The goodbyes carried warmth without the tension or unspoken issues that had often lingered beneath family interactions. Plans were made for my visit to Westbridge the following month, coordinated around Ryan's program completion ceremony and a weekend family dinner. After they departed, Marcus helped me finish clearing the rooftop setup. "That went well," he observed. "Better than your expectations, I think." "Much better," I acknowledged. Ryan's gesture with the envelope was completely unexpected. It showed genuine change, Marcus noted. Not superficial compliance, but real internal shift in perspective and values. I nodded, still processing the significance of the moment. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined us reaching this point. The dynamics seemed too entrenched, the patterns too established. "Crisis has a way of forcing recognition that comfort rarely achieves," he observed philosophically. "Not that I'd recommend family fund appropriation as a relationship improvement strategy, but in this case it did catalyze necessary changes." His wry observation made me laugh despite the serious undertone. "Definitely not a recommended strategy, but you're right about the catalyst effect." As we finished clearing the rooftop and headed down to the office level, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. What had begun with the shocking discovery of my emptied college fund had evolved through multiple phases of revelation, confrontation, and eventually, transformation. Not just for me, but for our entire family system. The business success of CodeBridge had certainly played a role in reshaping family perceptions and expectations. The tangible evidence of my capabilities had forced recognition that couldn't be minimized or taken for granted. Yet more fundamental shifts had occurred beneath the surface, in patterns of communication, in awareness of systemic dynamics, in willingness to acknowledge and address long-standing imbalances. Back in my office, I opened the envelope Ryan had given me. Inside was a carefully written check for $650, accompanied by a note. First payment toward restoration. Not just financial, but relational. Thank you for showing me what responsibility looks like in action rather than words. The amount was symbolic compared to the college fund total, yet the meaning behind it carried significant weight. This wasn't about the money. I had more than recovered financially through CodeBridge's success. It was about the principle of acknowledgement and accountability, the concrete demonstration of changed perspective. I placed the check in my desk drawer, a tangible reminder of how far we had all come. The college fund that had been emptied for Ryan's legal defense had initially seemed like a betrayal of my future. Yet in an unexpected way, it had ultimately accelerated positive transformations for everyone involved. My parents had been forced to recognize and begin addressing the unbalanced dynamics they had established and maintained. Ryan had confronted patterns of dependency and entitlement that might otherwise have continued indefinitely, and I had integrated my compartmentalized worlds, no longer needing to hide achievements or minimize capabilities to maintain family equilibrium. The next morning, I arrived early at the office to prepare for a key client meeting. As I walked through the development area, now bustling with a team that had grown from our initial 3-person operation, I felt a profound sense of alignment between personal and professional trajectories. CodeBridge was thriving, expanding beyond our initial projections into new markets and service areas. The potential we had identified in those early dorm room coding sessions was being realized on a scale we had only tentatively imagined. And alongside this business growth, personal connections were being rebuilt on healthier foundations. Not perfect, still requiring conscious attention to avoid slipping into established patterns, but steadily improving. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Thanks for dinner. The rooftop was amazing. I'm thinking about your Seattle expansion. Community colleges there have strong addiction counseling programs. Might be worth exploring transfer options when I complete my certification here. Just a thought." The message represented yet another evolution in his thinking, looking toward future possibilities rather than immediate gratifications. considering education and career paths that aligned with emerging purposes. The contrast with his approach a year ago was striking. I texted back. Interesting idea. CodeBridge will need community connections as we establish the Seattle office. Could be mutually beneficial timing. His response came quickly. Exactly what I was thinking. Professional synergy between siblings. Who would have predicted that a year ago? Indeed, who could have predicted any of the developments that had unfolded since that October morning when I discovered my college fund had been emptied? The venture capital investment, CodeBridge's rapid growth, Ryan's transformation through treatment and education, my parents' evolving understanding of long-established family patterns. The journey had been neither linear nor simple. There had been difficult conversations, painful recognitions, moments of anger and hurt alongside breakthroughs and reconciliations. Progress had come in irregular intervals, sometimes advancing significantly before temporarily retreating into familiar patterns that required patient redirection. Yet, the overall trajectory had been toward healthier dynamics. For me professionally as CodeBridge expanded, for Ryan personally as he embraced recovery and purpose, for our parents relationally as they recognized and began addressing problematic patterns, and for our family system collectively as we established more balanced and honest connections. As I prepared for the day's meetings, I reflected on a quote my economics professor had shared during senior year. Crisis and opportunity are often different perspectives on the same situation. At the time, it had seemed like philosophical abstraction. Now, having lived through the transformation of a family crisis into opportunity for growth across multiple dimensions, the wisdom resonated with concrete meaning. The day my parents emptied, my college fund for my stepbrother's legal defense had initially appeared to be a devastating setback, a betrayal of my future and confirmation of problematic family priorities. Yet that same day, I had closed a business deal that would ultimately secure not just my education, but my professional trajectory. And the crisis that followed hadn't just resolved the immediate financial implications, it had catalyzed necessary recognitions and changes that might otherwise have remained buried beneath comfortable but unhealthy patterns. The stepbrother who had benefited from the unbalanced family system had ultimately found purpose through facing consequences. The parents who had maintained those patterns had begun acknowledging and addressing their contributions to the dysfunction. As for me, the journey had integrated previously compartmentalized aspects of identity. The responsible daughter and the ambitious entrepreneur, the supportive sister and the boundary-establishing individual, the academic achiever and the business innovator. This integration hadn't come easily or without cost, but the resulting wholeness made the difficult path worthwhile. My calendar notification interrupted these reflections, alerting me to the approaching client meeting. I gathered my presentation, materials, focusing on the business objectives for the day ahead. Yet as I moved toward the conference room, I carried with me the understanding that professional success and personal growth weren't separate journeys, but intertwined paths, each informing and strengthening the other. The story that had begun with emptied college funds and secret business development had evolved into something neither I nor my family could have anticipated. A narrative of transformation across multiple dimensions, with chapters still being written as we continued moving forward on our individual and collective journeys. Whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain: we would face them with greater awareness, honesty, and mutual respect than had been possible before the crises that had forced recognition and catalyzed change. And in that awareness lay the foundation for healthier connections and more authentic engagement with both opportunities and obstacles yet to come. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.